Hi guys, and welcome to today's lesson. There's going to be a few stages and I'm going to be stopping and letting things dry a little bit today because, as I mentioned last week, this is just going to be a pencil sketch underneath an oil painting that I'm going to be completing. It's quite a detailed oil painting is the idea. And so what we want to do is seal in the drawing before we start to paint over the top of it. So there's going to be a couple of stages. First stage is going to be to fixative it, let that dry, which doesn't take long. Then we're going to put a thin acrylic wash to create a tone to paint over. Once that acrylic wash is dry, we'll start painting in oils. So we will be working in oils mostly today. You guys are just going to see little snippets, but there's going to be some waiting time in between for me. So the first thing I'm doing is got this little can of fixative that I'm using. You can use stuff like hairspray. People often use that for as a substitute that's a bit cheaper. But I'm just going to do a fairly kind of liberal coat of fixative, let that dry, which will probably be like 15 minutes for me, but I'll be cutting straight to the next step in the video. I'm going to do that now. I'll obviously do this in a well-ventilated area or outdoors. So that's a good amount of fixative over the surface of the piece, enough at least to seal it in for working over the top. And I'm going to let that dry for about 10 to 15 minutes and I'll be back in a moment. So what I'm going to do now is I've got some burnt umber paint, acrylic paint, so I'm going to put a tiny bit of that out, just a squeeze. And I've got a kind of medium-sized round brush, just a little bit bristly. Going to dip that in some water, make a pretty diluted, kind of washy, almost watercolory pass of burnt umber, and I want to really thinly spread that over the paper. So you can see, I can still see what's going on underneath. It's not smudged my drawing. As it dries as well, usually it'll go a little bit more transparent too. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a pattern just up in this corner, a little bit on this right hand side, just to kind of start building slightly kind of interesting texture. And that's it. So I'm going to leave that to dry now. And then when we get back, we'll be working in oils. So that probably won't take as long to dry as the fixative did. So you can do a sort of touch dry. It's sort of slightly buckled the paper ever so slightly because I'm just working on some sort of sketch paper, but nothing too drastic. It's a blocked piece of paper, so it can't kind of distort too much. But yeah, basically once that's sort of touch dry, it's already getting there. It's not really leaving any mark on my hand. But once that no longer feels damp as paper, we can start doing some oil painting on it. So yeah, we'll leave that again for a little bit. We'll come back and we'll start doing the painting. So we're ready to start painting in oils now. I've got a kind of slightly more flat brush I'm going to be painting with. And I'm going to start with just getting kind of the major colors in place. So if we sort of assume the background is kind of generally, not too badly matched, if you have a look at the reference, the link is below. Then we can maybe jump to getting the colors sort of around the hair in place and so on. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a note for where that hair crosses her face, which was slightly lost in the penciling sort of covering over the pencil process. So anything you want to kind of recapture, you can do at this point. And I'm just using burnt umber for this. So that's probably coming out maybe a little bit too brownish, so I'm going to mix a little bit of black just to get a kind of more grayed out color. A bit of black and a little bit of white as well. So I'm starting to get the hair in, kind of framing the face with this color. Slightly darker at the top of the hair as well. There's a few different kind of lighting things going on which we're going to be getting to as we progress through the painting. So one of them is there's kind of like a gold light hitting the side of the face that's kind of towards us and in shadow, and there's also that bluish light that's going to be hitting the outside of their face and the top of her head as well. But this is all fairly kind of exploratory what we're doing now. That same colour's not too bad to use down where we've got the kind of little coat shadows in place as well. And then the next thing I'm going to be doing is getting the red in for the scarf. So we've mostly got a kind of little bit just the top of where the scarf's going to go. Get that in too. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Cadmium Red I'm using. I'm going to wash that over as a sort of base. A little bit of burnt umber mixed in, and that's going to be the sort of base scarf in shadow color. Sort of, I guess, the part of the scarf that's in shadow and is a little bit lighter. Just mix in a little bit of black. To get the more shadowy tones. But it's a pretty comfortable drawing process or painting process because we've done the drawing beforehand. So all this stuff's pretty much in shadow as well, and then there's going to be a little bit of a sort of brighter red at the back. So yeah, that's looking all right for the scarf. So I'm gonna wipe my brush off a little bit and I'll get some colors in for her hair and light and the coat. So that's gonna be more using a little bit of raw umber and a bit of yellow ochre for this. And that's maybe not quite light enough, not too bad, but it could do with being a little bit lighter. So I'll add a bit of white, a bit more yellow ochre. Yeah, and that's looking a bit better. And then a touch of slightly a bit more yellow into that mixture. I want to kind of get this hair that's being illuminated from behind. So a little bit more white mixed into that. And we're working on the transition between this and the background later as well, but there's just a little bit of a starting point for that, those colours. And a little bit up here as well we can do. As I say, just as a starting point for now. Yeah, that's looking not too bad. Then I'm going to take a little bit of black to kind of carry on with the background. A little bit of black for kind of starting to get this black mixed with white to make a kind of blue-grey, just to start getting that bridge kind of travelling up and away. A little bit more black added for the starting to get the sort of shaping of the bridge here and there. Just sketching it in. So that's looking all right for the background. We want to start getting just a little bit of the face kind of sketched in now as well. So we'll slow down a little bit. I'm going to start to get some of the right sort of flesh tones mapped out. So it's not too bad as a kind of starting point for flesh tone. Maybe a little bit more yellow and red added to that would be good, just to make it a bit higher chroma. And I'm working a lot with the underpainting here. But I also need, so even though this looks about the same color, I want something I can kind of blend into as I start to add some lighter flesh tones. So I can add a little bit of white to that. So I'm just relying on that drawing that we already established. So this is the benefit of this process. A lot of it you can sort of work with what you've already established. In the drawing stage, which is where you should have felt like you had a bit more control. So I want to add a little bit more red into our tones for around the lips. Even more red. So probably went a little bit too yellow there. I'm mixing a little bit more red back in. Just mix a little bit of black and blue together just to get a slightly darker tone in place. That's looking all right. I'm going to grab a slightly smaller brush. And what I want to do now is just get the darker, crisper tones around the eyes. Reinforce, I'm just using, again, what I'd already established in the drawing stage. So I don't have to be too kind of precise about my shaping. I can kind of keep it fairly loose still. But I can be confident on the placement. Just shaping the forms a little bit around the nose, which actually helped quite a lot. I'm going to get more of a grey in for the whites of the eyes. Yeah, so just a little bit more white there. That's maybe slightly too bright. But we're going to be going over all of this in subsequent sessions. This is just our foundation. And then what we want to try to get is the bright shine on her side of the face, which is being illuminated more. So we're not going to get that in completely today, but we want to start to give a sense of it. So it's a little bit cooler, those colors, maybe adding a little bit of blue into it. And some transitional tones. So we're just using this white paint just to define the edge of the face, which is being kind of strongly illuminated. So it catches a little bit of that nose as well. And you can see adding in this little kind of highlighting helps a lot start to make the image make more sense. And that's going to be pretty close to not a bad spot to stop for today. Just because it's kind of working well, I'm kind of happy with how it looks. And there's always kind of like a limit, I find, in the first kind of session to what you can achieve in terms of kind of starting to get all this detail in. Like, you're not going to be able to get everything in. That's a kind of a given. So if you can get about this much information into the painting and it kind of looks okay, it gives you a really good basis to work from. You're not going to be overworking and then be unhappy, and kind of come back with sort of more fresh eyes to it. So yeah, the only thing I might do, I'm just going to try to get a little bit more of a goldeny, pinky golden light hue onto her cheek with the smaller brush. Everything's a little bit transparent, so it's not going to be yeah, that's looking all right, I think. I'm going to put just a touch of like a darker tone. I'll probably just pick up some black and burnt umber, just to get a darker tone in underneath the jawline a bit. I'll lift that, make it a bit more defined. That's a bit nicer. and just a touch of lighter paint for the hair and light. And that's going to do for today. So we've got a fair bit of colour in, obviously sealed it in, all that sort of stuff's useful. So next week we can do some sort of darker passes to kind of start playing around with brighter and darker parts, because we want quite a good sense of luminosity in this picture. But yeah, overall it's a good starting point. So hopefully you guys followed and were able to have a go yourself. As always, if you have any questions about the process, just put them in the comments below. And you can follow us on YouTube if you want to stay up to date with this and other lessons. And you can also click the link through to the website to see the sorts of paid qualifications that we offer as well. But until next time, hope you guys enjoy your art, and I'll see you soon.